Well, good morning. Hey, it's great to see everyone this morning. I was looking up something that went along with the idea of that phrase that a lot of people like to say, or a lot of people have used, and that's that idea of aged to perfection. There's a few things that most people would think of immediately when you think of something that's aged to perfection. A lot of times it's in reference to something that is alcoholic and or something that is cheese, some version of cheese. Those are the two main things. But I found it interesting that there's actually all kinds of things out there that people say get better with age. And I think that's really more what the phrase should be, because we understand things are never necessarily perfect, but better with age is a good way to put it. You don't believe all that? Okay, that's fine. We'll see. We'll see how true it is. Say, I saw some things that people were saying that there was quite a few vegetables out there that are better with age, or could be aged to perfection, in the sense that if you let them ferment, they have all kinds of potential health benefits when you eat them and all those kind of things. Now, I'll be honest, the list of vegetables was a bunch of vegetables that I don't eat, whether fermented or not. For the most part, there was a lot of things that I didn't even know what they were. But there's supposedly all kinds of things out there that can be aged to perfection, or get better with age. When it comes to being a Christian, there's a concept of better with age that is true as well, and I hope that you'll keep that in mind as we talk this morning. We're still continuing on our lessons from Titus. We're in Titus chapter 2, verses 2 and 3, and we're going to be talking about that sound teaching that Titus was getting discussed by Paul with. In verse 1 of chapter 2, he says it's time for you to speak. He says it's time for you to speak that which is fitting for sound doctrine. And the first thing that you see Paul go into after telling Titus that is he starts telling you what that sound doctrine is and who that sound doctrine needs to go to. And the first group he starts with is sound teaching, and I'm going to put it this way, for the season. We're not gonna sit here and try to make people feel old by any means, because this can mean a lot of things. One of the things that I hope you understand is when it says in the Bible, it says older men, older women. That doesn't mean you have to have gray hair. The truth is, I've been a Christian for 25 years. As a Christian, that's not necessarily considered a young Christian. I've been in the church for a long time, a member of the church, a baptized member of the church. At some point, I start fitting into this category too. I'm not new. I'm not necessarily just starting out. And so when we talk about sound teaching for the season, not only does it necessarily talk about those with age, but also those who have been Christians for a long time. And so we're going to dive into this sound teaching that Paul is trying to help Titus get across to the people on the island of Crete. And we're going to talk about what this is. For this week, we're going to talk about those who are the older men and the older women. The sound teaching that Paul wants them to know because of the things they're specifically struggling with on that island. And so when we get into it, the first category he gets into, and it probably makes sense that he talks about them first, because these are the men who are supposed to be leading the church. So he goes to the men first. And he says this: older men are to be temperate, dignified, sensible, sound in faith, in love, in perseverance. So let's break that down just a little bit. It says older men are to be temperate. This is that idea of being sober-minded, clear-minded. Your judgment is not clouded. You're restraining your conduct. And to a degree, it's kind of about self-control. This was a much, much needed quality on the island of Crete. Crete was a place where most people, if not all, put little, if any, effort into restraining their own conduct. They just did whatever they felt was right, or whatever they felt was good, whatever seemed best at the time, they would just do it. It's really hard sometimes not to look at our country today and see the same kind of things that were going on in the island of Crete. People who just do whatever feels right, whatever makes sense to them, whether it has any kind of moral or logical compass or not. But he also says that they are to be dignified. This is the idea of being worthy of respect, of honor. It even carries to a degree an idea of seriousness with it. Someone who is serious. And to a degree, what he's getting at with the older men, these Christians, is that they need to take things seriously when it comes to God. They need to live a life that is dignified and serious with the things that are truly important. And that is sound doctrine, sound teaching, the fitting things for their life that Titus is trying to help them learn, that Paul is teaching Titus. This is a calling for us to be godly. It's a calling for us to live in a godly manner in ways that no matter who wants to say bad things about us, if we live in a way that is respectful, if we live in a way that is worthy, there's nothing anybody's going to really be able to say outside these doors. They're going to see how we live our lives, how we conduct ourselves, and they're going to understand that we respect God. Now, they might not care about God. They might not respect God. They might not respect us. But that's the way we're called to live. And if by chance people pay attention to that, you might even win them or have them start asking why. Why do you live this way? Why do you care about God? Why do you do these things? And then just maybe, you might get to start a conversation that saves their soul. That is why we are to live dignified. It also talks about the idea of being sensible. And this is very, very closely connected to the very first one about being temperate. It's more the idea of prudent, thoughtful, but again, self-controlled. That idea that you are in control of your own thoughts, your own emotions, what you do, what you choose to do. We can see the fact that he's bringing this up and almost saying it in two different ways, that this is a pressing need on Crete. Like I said, this is a quality where they don't really have this. They're doing anything they want. They don't put a lot of time into controlling their own desires. They just let their fleshly desires run wild. And that's not what's good. And so you can see how Paul emphasizes this throughout the second chapter, whether it's here in verse 2 or a few verses later in 5 and 6 and 12. Constantly he uses the word sensible, not only for the older men, but also when you get into the younger. These are important things that we need to understand. We need to be self-controlled, especially for the people on Crete. But even today, we need to understand that we can't just jump headlong into what the rest of the world wants to do or what we think we want to do at times. We've got to think about what we're doing. Think about, does this bring glory to God? Is this the will of God? Is this something we should be doing with our lives? That's what it means to be sensible, to take a minute, to think about it, to not just jump headlong into something because it feels right. The last thing that he says to older men there in the verse is that they are to be sound. This goes connected straight to the sound teaching that he's talking about, but he describes what he means specifically. He says sound in faith. Sound in faith is the idea that you know what the book says and you follow it. You live according to the Word of God, according to His teachings. But this also carries along that idea of age to perfection. What I mean by that is that better with age. As time goes on, and for a Christian, you are supposed to less and less trust in yourself and more trust in God. You are getting better with age. You're growing closer to Him constantly in your life. That's what it means to be sound in faith. But he also says to be sound in love. This is that idea that, hey, just because they made movies about the grumpier old men, that doesn't mean that's the way we get to act. As much as maybe that might be fun. We need to show people love. We need to grow in love, to care about others, not only in the church, but those outside the church. We need to be people who are constantly showing the kind of love that God showed to us. The whole reason we have the possibility of everlasting life, of salvation, of forgiveness. You know, and the interesting thing about bringing in the idea of love here is when you include sound in love to a teaching like this, that means you have to include all of the other things that talk about love from the Bible. Now think about what it means to truly love. Where has the Bible talked about love? And all the things that go along with it. Maybe you jump over to 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and you start thinking about all the things that Paul says that love is. So now how much is in this little phrase? It says sound in love. Well, what does it mean to be sound in love? Well, what is love? Love never fails. Love is kind. Love is this. Love is that. Put all these things in that. That's what it means to be sound. We grow in this love constantly, and we share this love with others. This is that agape love, not just simply brotherly love or something like that. The last one he says there is to be sound in perseverance. This is the idea that as older men, we have been through the storms. The likelihood is that you've probably weathered a few. But you are sound in perseverance in a way that you understand you can get through those storms because you have God on your side and you trust in Him more than you trust in yourself. This is something that we need to do, something that is important because it means that we can be an example to all those who might be looking at us from inside the church, from outside the church, that it is possible to live a godly life all the way to the end. No matter what comes against you, no matter who attacks you, no matter what the struggle might be, your example can show that it's possible to remain strong, to remain faithful all the way to the end of time. That's why it's so important, these three things to be sound in. And we'll talk about them a little more later. But then he switches over in verse 3 to the older women. It says, older women likewise are to be reverent in their behavior, not malicious gossips, nor enslaved to much wine, teaching what is good. So let's take a look at that for older women. They are to be reverent in their behavior. This word breaks down into two different things. It breaks down into the two root words that mean sacred and fitting. And so it indicates this behavior that is fit for sacred service. The idea of your service to God. It's trying to say that we are to live a life that befits a holy person. That is what God is trying to teach these older women in Crete, that they live the way that is holy, is respectable, is all the kind of wrapped up things similar to what was said to the men, but maybe wrapped up into one. They need to live a life that befits a holy one of God, someone who has been called by God. It also says that they are not to be malicious gossips. You know, this is one of those words that actually comes from the word diabolos. If you, even if you don't know Greek, that probably is a word that strikes a chord in your mind. What you think of when you think of diablo. You're thinking of the devil. And that's actually what this word can be translated to say. But one of the other ways that this expression is translated as this seen is that the devil is also seen as one who is a slanderer, one who is an evil speaker. And that's what this is getting at, is that these people are malicious gossips. They're being evil with the things they're saying. Think about that. These women on Crete are talking in ways that they shouldn't be talking. They're saying things that shouldn't be said, are not necessary, are not good for anybody. All they're doing is tearing people down. And so what he's getting at, he says, you need to eliminate all this talk.